The widowed cowboy had watched Emily Dawson build that cabin alone for 6 weeks. But when the Montana sky turned white and he finally rode down from the ridge, his horse carried something that made her reach for her dead husband's revolver. Why had William Carter really come? The axe handle cracked with a sharp snap. Blood warmed Emily's wool-wrapped palm as snow struck her face. Then came hoofbeats, slow, heavy, getting closer. She raised the revolver. William stopped beyond the unfinished wall, canvas and rope hanging from his saddle. "You've been watching me." "Yes, ma'am." What happened next began with a blizzard. Would you have trusted him? Tell me below. The axe struck frozen ground with a hard, flat crack. Emily Dawson stopped only long enough to look at the handle. A split had opened near the head. Blood had already soaked through the strip of wool wrapped around her right palm, and 16 logs still lay where she had dragged them before sunrise. The November light over the Montana foothills was thinning fast. Snow sat low on the western mountains, gray beneath a pewter sky. Emily tightened her grip around the cracked handle and swung again. 8 months had passed since the Harland Creek mine folded in on itself and took James Dawson with it. 3 men had gone underground that morning. None came home. The mining company sent Emily a letter, a handshake, and enough money to bury her husband without owing the undertaker. 6 weeks later, the bank took the Dawson house because James had borrowed against it through the previous winter. By summer, Emily was renting a narrow room above the Mill Haven saloon. By autumn, she had decided she would rather freeze on land that belonged to her than stay warm in a room where Mrs. Alcott reminded her twice a week that she was fortunate to be tolerated. So Emily bought a quarter section west of town, rocky soil, wind exposure, a stand of lodgepole pine, a creek that kept moving even when the shallow ponds froze. Nobody wanted it. That was why she could afford it. The cabin was another matter. Emily had watched the new livery stable go up board by board. She had asked Carl Webb how deep a foundation log should sit and endured the pause before he realized she truly wanted the answer. She bought 6-penny nails from Pete at the general store, saved bent ones, straightened them on a flat stone, and learned to cut notches by ruining timber she could barely replace. People in Mill Haven laughed, not always to her face. That didn't make it quieter. She had stopped measuring her days by what people said. Now she measured them by logs. 2 courses on the east wall, 3 on the south, a doorway wider than most men thought necessary. And every afternoon, somewhere above the property, a cowboy sat on a dark bay horse and watched. Emily noticed him first in early October, then again 2 days later, then nearly every day after that. He never approached, never waved, never rode across her boundary. He simply sat on the ridge as still as one of the burned pine trunks left from an old lightning fire. Pete eventually gave her a name. William Carter, rancher, cowboy, widower. His wife Eleanor had taught school in Mill Haven before she and their infant son died during the winter of 1885. "Keeps mostly to himself now," Pete had said. Emily had folded her receipt and put it into her coat pocket. She knew something about keeping to yourself. That did not mean she liked being watched. The wind changed shortly after 3. Emily felt it before she saw the clouds move. The cold sharpened. The pines stopped whispering. The whole valley seemed to hold its breath. She looked west. Snow was coming down the mountains like a curtain. Too fast. Mill Haven was 3 miles east. The boarding house might as well have been 30. Emily dropped the axe and started working the canvas over her lumber stack. The little lean-to she had built from scrapboards would hold if the roof stayed on. Maybe. A horse snorted behind her. Emily turned. The cowboy from the ridge was riding down. Not alone. A pack horse followed him, loaded with rolled canvas, rope, timber braces, and 2 canvas sacks. Emily reached inside her coat and drew James's revolver. She kept it low. William Carter stopped 20 feet away. He was broad through the shoulders, perhaps 40 or a little past it, with a weathered face and tired blue-gray eyes. Snow had already caught along the brim of his hat. His gaze went to the revolver, then back to Emily. He touched 2 fingers to his hat. "Ma'am, you've been watching me." He did not pretend otherwise. "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" William looked past her toward the half-raised walls. "Couldn't figure out how you kept doing it." Emily watched him. The first flakes struck her coat. "What are you doing here now?" "Storm's worse than it looks." "I know what weather is." "I expect you do." He nodded toward the packhorse. "Brought canvas, rope, 2 braces, food." "I didn't ask you for anything." "No, ma'am." "Then what is it?" For the first time, his answer took a moment. "Neighboring." Emily almost laughed, but the wind hit hard enough to pull the canvas from one of her stakes. She caught it with both hands. William stayed mounted. He did not move until she decided. Emily looked toward the white wall crossing the foothills, then back at him. "Can you tie a knot that'll hold in this?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then quit sitting there." He was off the horse before she finished speaking. They worked until the storm swallowed the ridge. William held the canvas while Emily drove stakes. He braced the north side of the lean-to and showed her where one fastening would tear loose under a crosswind. He did not take the hammer from her hand. He simply pointed. She changed it. By dark, the lumber was covered, the shelter reinforced, and both horses were secured on the lee side beneath heavy canvas. Then the blizzard came in earnest. Inside the lean-to, there was barely room for 2 people to sit without touching knees. Emily lit a small spirit lamp. William removed his hat. Wind hammered the boards. For a long time neither spoke. Then Emily said, "Eleanor?" William stared at the little flame. "My wife." A pause. "And the baby?" He nodded. "Boy, didn't live long enough for us to name him proper." Emily looked down at her hands. "James died in March." "The mine?" "Yes." William did not say he was sorry. Emily noticed. She was glad. After a while she asked, "Why did you keep coming back to that ridge?" "At first?" "Yes. Curiosity." "And after that?" He looked at her through the dim light. "I suppose I wanted to see if you'd finish it." Emily listened to the canvas strain under the wind. "You think I will?" William answered without hesitation. "Yes." By morning, the storm had blown east. The world outside was white, silent, and painfully bright. The lumber had survived. William saddled his bay. Emily stood beside the unfinished wall, looking at the clean snow packed between the logs. "Carter," he turned, "you know more about setting logs than I do." He waited. Emily pulled her gloves tighter. "I'm not asking you to build my house." William said nothing. "I'm asking if you'll build beside me." For a moment, he only looked at her. Then he removed his gloves. He did not climb back toward the ridge. He walked toward the unfinished wall. "Where do you want to start?" Emily pointed to the east corner. "There." And for the first time since James died, the work waiting for her did not feel entirely like something she had to carry alone. William came down from the ridge the next morning before the sun cleared the pines. Emily was already outside. She had cleared snow from the foundation with a flat shovel and set a blackened coffee pot near a small fire. William tied his dark bay beside the lumber stack, took one look at the east corner, and reached for the draw knife. "You're late," Emily said. William glanced toward the pale sky. "Sun isn't up." "I've been up." "That appears to be the trouble." Emily looked at him. His mouth moved slightly. It took her a second to realize William Carter had made a joke. She handed him the draw knife. "East corner." "Yes, ma'am." That became their routine. William rode down after tending his cattle. Emily was usually working before he arrived. They notched logs, lifted them with rope, packed gaps, and argued quietly over things neither of them considered worth arguing loudly about. He stopped correcting every mistake. She stopped assuming every suggestion was an attempt to take control. One afternoon, William noticed her flexing her right hand after every third swing of the axe. He said nothing. The following morning, Emily found the axe sharpened so cleanly that the blade bit into pine with nearly half the effort. She looked toward him. William was fitting a peg, as though he had no idea how the axe had gotten that way. At noon, she placed 2 biscuits beside his tin cup instead of 1. He noticed. He said nothing either. Their kindness developed a language that required very few words. Then came the foundation log. William crouched beside the south wall and tapped it with the handle of his hammer. "This one's coming out." Emily stared at him. "No. It's holding moisture underneath. It took us half a day to put that log there." "I remember. And now you want half another day taking it out?" William scraped away a little frozen dirt and showed her the darkened wood. "So, come spring, water will sit here. Maybe it lasts 2 years. Maybe 5. Then you'll have a wall resting on rot." Emily hated the answer because she could see he was right. She stood with both hands on her hips for a long moment. "Take it out." William nodded. No smile, no victory. That mattered. Later, while they ate beside the stacked lumber, Emily told him James used to whistle whenever he repaired anything. "Badly," she said. "Same 3 notes. Never once found the 4th. William looked into his coffee. Eleanor could sing. Emily waited. Beautiful voice. Sundays especially. That doesn't sound troublesome. She changed hymn words when she knew I was listening. Emily laughed before she could stop herself. William went completely still. Not because the sound was strange, because it wasn't. For one brief second, Emily felt like the woman she had been before March. She looked away. William did not make the moment heavier by speaking, but later she caught him smiling while he worked on the window frame. She returned the favor and said nothing. By early December, 4 walls stood against the Montana wind. William was measuring the front opening when he asked, "How wide?" "Wider." He moved the rule. "This wide?" "More." He lowered it. "Emily, you planning to drive a wagon through your front room?" "No." "Then why?" She rested one hand against the rough pine. "Because it's mine." William's expression changed. Emily looked through the opening toward the snowy creek. "I spent months in rooms belonging to banks and landlords. Every doorway felt like somebody else's permission." She turned back. "I want one nobody can tell me I'm too much for." William considered that. Then he moved the mark another 4 inches. "All right." A few days later, Helen Marsh arrived in a covered buggy. She brought preserves, asked about the cabin, admired the hearthstones, and finally reached the reason for her visit. "People have noticed Mr. Carter comings here." Emily continued fitting a window peg. "I imagine so. He's difficult to hide." Helen's mouth tightened. "You know what I mean." Emily set the peg down. "Has William harmed somebody?" "No." "Has he behaved improperly toward me?" "No, but then it sounds like Mill Haven has run short of useful things to discuss." Helen left with most of her preserves still in the buggy. William arrived an hour later. Emily never mentioned the visit. Near sunset, they fitted the final wall log. Both stepped backward. 4 walls, a real doorway, 2 window openings, the beginnings of a hearth. William breathed into his gloves. "You're going to make it." Emily placed her palm against the wall. "It's proof." "Of what?" "That losing one home doesn't mean I can't have another." William looked at the cabin, then at her. "Nobody's taking it from you." The words were quiet. Emily remembered them. 2 mornings later, she was inside Pete's store buying lamp oil when she heard Thomas Reed speaking near the stove. "Residency requirement," Reed was saying. "Questionable improvement. County review ought to settle it." Emily placed her coins on Pete's counter. "My quarter section has a recording number, Mr. Reed. Taxes were paid October 3rd. If you'd like it, I can recite the number too. Reed turned. He was dressed too well for the muddy street outside, his wool coat buttoned neatly to the throat. My concern is procedure, Mrs. Dawson. My concern is why my procedure interests you. For the first time, Reed's polite expression slipped. Only slightly. William found the answer 3 days later. He rode Emily's western boundary until he reached the creek. Even under ice along both banks, water moved through the center. Clear. Reliable. Then he remembered Reed's growing cattle herd east of the foothills. That evening he told Emily what he had learned. Reed had tried twice to acquire the parcel before she bought it. Emily looked toward the creek. So it was never the cabin. No. It was the water. William nodded. After that, the property felt different. At 2 a.m, a bell they had tied near the lumber gave one sharp rattle. Emily woke instantly. She took James's revolver and stepped outside. 2 men stood near the stacked timber. Leave. One moved forward. Emily fired into the frozen ground several feet from his boots. His horse jerked against the reins. That ended his courage. Both men mounted and disappeared toward the road. William arrived at first light, after finding fresh tracks near the ridge trail. When he saw Emily standing outside unharmed, something broke through his usual restraint. Emily. Not Mrs. Dawson. Emily. I'll stay here nights. No. His jaw tightened. You had 2 men on your property, and I won't replace 2 unwanted men with 1 invited guardian. William looked ready to argue. Then he stopped. What do you want? By noon they had stronger warning lines, bells near the lumber, and a reinforced lock. The compromise belonged to both of them. The next afternoon, a county wagon came through the snow. Samuel Briggs stepped down carrying an official envelope. Thomas Reed had filed a challenge. Emily had 14 days to prove the land met the habitation conditions attached to the sale. 4 walls were not enough. She needed a roof, secure openings, a working hearth. Emily looked at the unfinished chimney stones. Beyond them, clouds were gathering over the mountains again. William read the notice twice. Emily took it from his hand. Then we've got 14 days. The next morning started before dawn. William arrived with 2 sacks of lime, a coil of rope, and a short-handled mason's hammer borrowed from Carl Webb. Emily already had the hearthstones sorted by size along the south wall, each one brushed clean of frozen mud. They did not waste time talking. The roof came first. Snow load mattered more than comfort, and William insisted on resetting 1 rafter after he found the angle wrong by less than an inch. Emily looked at the sky. That's half an hour. It's half an hour now or half a roof in February. She stared at him, then handed him the pry bar. Fix it. They worked until lantern light each night. Emily's shoulders stiffened until lifting a coffee cup hurt. William's knuckles split from cold and mortar. Neither mentioned either thing. On the 6th night, Emily sat against the unfinished wall while William checked the chimney draw. She closed her eyes for what she meant to be 1 minute. When she woke, his coat was over her shoulders. William was outside in the snow, standing on the roofline with a lantern hanging from 1 peg, fitting the last chimney stone into place. Emily watched him through the open window frame. He never looked down. Something inside her moved anyway. She pulled his coat tighter and went back to work. On the 10th day, the hearth was ready. William knelt with a match. Emily stood beside him. The flame caught slowly, then took hold. Both of them watched the chimney. For several seconds, nothing. Then a thin, gray thread of smoke lifted cleanly into the cold Montana sky. Emily laughed. William did too. It startled them both. Their eyes met. The room went quiet in a different way. William took 1 small step toward her. Hooves sounded outside. They stepped apart. Samuel Briggs entered carrying his notebook. He checked the roof, measured the openings, tested the shutters, inspected the hearth and chimney. Emily followed him without speaking. Finally, he closed the book. "Mrs. Dawson, this qualifies as habitation." Emily's hand closed around the edge of the table. Briggs gave her a small nod. "Your claim remains in good standing." After he left, William looked at her. "You did it. We did the work. You built the house." Emily looked at the fire. For once, she did not argue. 3 days later, Frank Cully rode up with 2 men. Thomas Reed's foreman stayed mounted. He offered Emily more money than she had paid for the quarter section. She refused before he finished naming the figure. Cully smiled without warmth. Winter's hard country for a woman alone. William shifted beside her. Emily lifted one hand. He stopped. "If Mr. Reed wants my answer again," she said, "he can come hear it himself." Cully rode away. The council notice arrived the next morning. Reed was demanding a broader review of the original sale. This time, Emily and William divided the work. William went to ranchers who remembered the Garrett land dispute. Emily went to town. Carl Webb agreed to speak. Pete agreed reluctantly. Helen Marsh found Emily outside the Mercantile and admitted Reed had pressured Eli over his vote. Emily listened, then asked only one question. "What will your husband do when it matters?" Helen looked down the street. "I don't know." The hearing came under a hard white sky. Snow-covered horses lined Millhaven's main street. Inside the council hall, every bench was full. Emily entered first. William came beside her. Not ahead. Beside. Thomas Reed's lawyer spoke for nearly 15 minutes. Then Emily stood. She produced the deed. Samuel Briggs confirmed habitation. Carl Webb described the materials and construction dates. Pete confirmed Reed had asked about the parcel before Emily purchased it. William laid out what he had learned about the Garrett dispute. Then Eli Marsh rose. The whole room watched him. He looked once at Helen, then at Owen Briggs. "Mr. Reed asked me to vote his way." A murmur moved through the room. Owen Briggs called for order. The vote came minutes later. 4-1. Emily's title stood. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Thomas Reed stood. The careful manner was gone. He spoke about Emily's widowhood, her judgment, her appearance. He suggested William's presence explained how the cabin had really gone up, and that respectable people could draw their own conclusions about why an unmarried cowboy spent every day on a widow's land. Emily did not answer him. She turned her head. William stood beside her. This was the moment. She waited. William's face had changed. Something old had reached him. He said nothing. 1 second. 2. 3. Emily straightened her coat. "You made your ruling," she told the council. Then she looked once at William. No anger. That would have been easier. "I have nothing further." She walked out. William followed several moments later. "Emily." She climbed into her wagon. Did not turn. That night the cabin was warm. The deed lay flat on the table beside the lamp. Emily should have felt victorious. Instead, she took William's spare work gloves from the peg near the hearth and placed them beside the door. Later, hoofbeats sounded outside. Emily looked up. The horse kept going, past her property, up toward the ridge. William did not come down. For the first time since the blizzard, the cabin felt larger when she was alone. Morning did not improve it. Emily rose before daylight, stirred the coals in the hearth, and carried 2 buckets from the creek. She chopped kindling, repaired the loose shutter, swept pine needles from the floor, then ate breakfast at the table William had helped level. His spare gloves remained beside the door. She considered putting them outside. She didn't. That irritated her more. For 6 days, Emily continued without him. The cabin stayed warm. The creek kept running beneath its rim of ice. Her roof held when another 4 inches of snow fell. She needed William less than she missed him. That was the troublesome part. Across the ridge, William worked his cattle until darkness. Samuel Brooks, an elderly ranch hand who had known William before Eleanor died, watched him repair the same section of corral twice. On the seventh evening, Samuel finally said, "What happened?" William kept tightening wire. "I stood there." Samuel waited. William dropped the pliers into the toolbox. "That's what happened." Later, beside the bunkhouse stove, the rest came out. 10 years earlier, Cal Briggs had been fighting over water with Reed's brother. William, younger and quicker to anger, decided Cal needed defending. He confronted Reed's men publicly, made threats Cal had never asked him to make, and turned a difficult negotiation into a feud. Cal lost access to the water, then cattle, then his ranch. His family left the valley. William had carried the wrong lesson ever since. "If I hadn't interfered," Samuel cut him off. "That isn't what you did wrong." William looked at him. "You didn't stand with Cal. You stood in front of him." The stove popped softly. Samuel leaned back. "Mrs. Dawson didn't ask you to fight her battle." William said nothing. "She asked you to stand there." Before sunrise the next morning, hoofbeats stopped outside Emily's cabin. She opened the door. William stood on the porch with his hat in his hands. She did not invite him inside. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You owe me more than words." "I know." That answer kept the door open. William told her about Cal Briggs. He told it without making himself the victim of it. When he finished, Emily asked, "So when Reed spoke, you saw something that happened 10 years ago?" "Yes." "And forgot who was standing in front of you?" William swallowed. "Yes." "Will you do it again?" He looked toward the creek before answering. "I don't know what I'll be afraid of tomorrow." Emily's expression did not change. "But I know fear doesn't get my vote anymore." The wind moved between them. Then Emily opened the door wider. "Coffee's hot." It was not forgiveness. William understood that. He entered. His eyes found the gloves beside the door. He did not touch them. Emily saw him notice. Neither spoke about it. She poured coffee into 2 tin cups. Afterward, Emily took him behind the cabin. 3 reserve logs lay beneath canvas. Someone had cut deep into the underside of each one, carefully enough that the damage would have remained hidden until the timber carried weight. William crouched beside them. "We should go to the sheriff." Emily looked at him. He caught himself. A small silence followed. "What do you want to do?" That mattered more than he knew. Emily folded the canvas back over the logs. "We gather enough that nobody can bury it." They began with Carl Webb. The blacksmith examined the cuts and recognized the width of the tool marks. Pete remembered selling a new crosscut saw and lamp oil to one of the men sometimes seen working for Reed. William brought in Samuel Holt, a former territorial ranger who knew how to ask questions without announcing what he already knew. Samuel's brother Daniel searched older county records. Piece by piece, a pattern formed. Payments, supplies, names. A deputy friendly with Reed appeared more than once. Nothing proved Thomas Reed himself had cut a log or sent a man onto Emily's property, but it showed something almost as important. Men around Reed understood what he wanted without requiring him to say it plainly. One evening, Emily and William sat across from each other at her table. Receipts and copied entries spread beneath the lamp. Outside, snow whispered against the windows. William gathered his coat. "Do you want me to leave?" Emily looked at him. "No," he stopped. "I want you to stay because I said stay, not because you decided I needed you." William slowly set the coat back down. "All right." They returned to the papers. Nothing more happened between them. And somehow, that made the moment more intimate. 2 days later, Daniel Holt rode out carrying another county record. Reed had filed for control of the adjoining parcel. William spread the map across Emily's table. If Reed gained that ground, his grazing interests could press against the practical approaches around Emily's creek. He might not own her water, but he could make living beside it difficult for years. Samuel Holt arrived before noon with something worse for Reed. Copies of payment entries involving the deputy. Not enough yet to put Thomas Reed in irons. Enough to make his story of an innocent property dispute difficult to believe. Emily stood before the hearth and buttoned her coat. William watched her. "You sure?" "No." She reached for her hat. "Saddle the horses." They rode out together. The road climbed before turning east toward Mill Haven. Months earlier, William Carter had sat above that same country, watching a woman build alone. Now Emily rode first through the snow. William kept pace beside her. At the crest of the ridge, Mill Haven appeared below them, chimney smoke lying low over the roofs. William glanced at Emily. She did not ask whether he would speak when the time came. She shouldn't have to. Together they started down the ridge. By the time they reached Mill Haven, thaw had turned the main street to brown mud. Emily tied her gray mare outside the county building. William secured the bay beside her and stepped back so she could lead. People noticed. Pete stood in his doorway. Carl Webb came out of the smithy, wiping his hands on a leather apron. Helen Marsh stopped beneath the awning across the street. Thomas Reed was already there. So were Owen Briggs, Daniel Holt, and Samuel Holt. The room inside filled quickly. Samuel Holt laid out the payment records first. Daniel followed with the older land files and Reed's new application for the adjoining parcel. Emily stood at the council table with her deed in one hand. "This is not a new dispute," she said. "It is the same one wearing a different coat." Reed leaned back. Then he looked at William. "Ask Carter what happened to Cal Briggs." The room shifted. William's shoulders tightened. Reed saw it and pressed harder. "Ask him how much land Cal lost after Carter decided to play savior." Emily turned before William could speak. "I already know." Reed blinked. "He told me." The silence sharpened. Emily kept her eyes on Reed. You can't shame a man with something he's already had the courage to name. Then William stepped forward. "I thought standing up for Cal meant taking over his fight." His voice was steady. "I was wrong then." He looked once at Emily. "And I was wrong when I stood silent in this room." No excuse, no defense. He simply stayed where he was. Reed tried another direction. Carl Webb did not move. Pete stayed. Helen stayed. Eli Marsh stood beside his wife. Samuel Holt kept one hand resting on the documents. For the first time, Reed looked around and found nobody willing to look away. "You think one woman can fight every cattleman and every county office forever?" he said. Emily glanced toward the windows, toward the muddy street and the mountains beyond it. "No." Reed almost smiled. Then Emily continued, "I built my cabin one log at a time." She touched the deed. "And you're losing the same way." Her eyes moved across the room. "One person at a time." Nobody cheered. That would have made it smaller. Owen Briggs closed Reed's adjoining application and placed it beneath his ledger. "This purchase is suspended pending formal review." He looked toward Samuel Holt. "The payment records go to the territorial authorities." Then he turned to Emily. "Your title remains sound." Emily let out one slow breath. That was all. Outside, William asked, "Need anything?" Emily looked toward the horses. "Come home." He went still. Emily noticed. "I said come home, Carter. Don't make me repeat myself." A smile touched his face. He followed. Spring came slowly. Snow pulled back from the foothills. The creek swelled brown and cold. Grass appeared in narrow strips along the south-facing slope. In April, Emily started building again. A kitchen this time. She had drawn the plans herself. William arrived with gravel from the creek bed and studied the page spread across her table. "This door swings wrong." Emily looked at him. He pointed. "You'll lose half the wall when it's open." She studied it. He was right. "That's actually useful." William raised an eyebrow. High praise. Carl Webb brought hinges. The Garfield brothers helped set one beam. Helen Marsh arrived twice with food and never stayed long enough to make kindness into a performance. By May, the kitchen stood finished. One evening, William came through the new doorway holding something wrapped in cloth. Emily opened it. A plain iron key lay in her palm. "Carl made the lock," William said. Emily turned the key once between her fingers, then looked at him. "Ask me directly." William's eyes moved around the room. The hearth, the wide doorway, the table where she had made him earn his way back. Then he looked at Emily. "I've got my ranch." She waited. "I don't need your land. I don't want what's yours." His voice lowered. "You built this place because you intended to live here." Emily closed her fingers around the key. William took one breath. "Emily, could you make room for me?" The silence that followed was nothing like the silence in the council hall. This one held no fear. Emily looked at the walls. She remembered James, the cracked axe, the first blizzard, William on the ridge, the first fire, his silence, his apology, and every morning he had returned after that. Then she looked at him. "There's room." William exhaled. Emily stepped closer. "But you're helping with the garden fence." He laughed, a real laugh. Outside, evening settled over the Montana foothills. Smoke rose from Emily's chimney. The creek moved full beneath the cottonwoods. William's dark bay stood beside her wagon. 2 lamps burned behind the cabin windows. And on the ridge where William Carter had once sat alone and watched Emily Dawson build a life without him, there was nobody at all. The cowboy was inside. Maybe that was the truest ending their story could have had. Emily had never built that cabin hoping a man would come along and complete it. She built it because grief had already taken enough from her, because she needed one doorway that belonged to her, one hearth nobody could take away, and one place where tomorrow might still be worth waking up for. William had his own rebuilding to do. He had to learn that loving someone wasn't the same as rescuing them. Sometimes love meant standing beside a person without stepping in front of them. Sometimes a second chance wasn't given with a promise. It was earned quietly, one honest choice at a time. Imagine yourself in Emily's place, standing inside something you rebuilt after losing what you thought your life would be. Would you have found the courage to make room for someone again? Maybe healing is like building a frontier cabin. One log, one nail, one difficult morning after another. Until someday, you look around and realize you're not merely surviving anymore. If Emily and William's story stayed with you, tell me in the comments what you believe finally made Emily trust him again. And if you'd like to spend more evenings with stories of love, resilience, mystery, and people finding their way home, you're warmly invited to subscribe. There are more stories waiting just beyond the next ridge.